Welcome everyone to XpoNorth's Fearless Business Week. It's a chance where we get to speak to people in an industry and ask them quite fearless questions or questions that are really pressing on our mind, especially during a time of COVID. We're so excited to have Tim here. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
Tim is a director of sales in both entertainment and sports at Tysers Insurance. Tim, can you tell us a little bit first about who you are and what you do?
So I've been working at Tysers providing insurance for various areas within entertainment and sport for the last 3 or so years. And the areas that we work in are music and live events, film, media and TV, theatres and the venues and the productions. And also sport, and which is quite heavily orientated on motorsport. So we provide everything from cancellation insurance to liability, personal accident, and all of those in between, right through the verticals from the major venues right to freelancers and people that are subcontracted to work in them.
That's awesome. We're speaking to the right person, clearly, because from freelancers to venues to filmmaking, we work with a lot of artists who, on paper, insurance sounds very straightforward, but really it's becoming the stopgap where it is either helping people get started, keeping people from getting started, covering people, floating people during this time, not floating people during this time. It's a really exciting, I think, place to be. And we have a lot of questions for you. So first and foremost, from where you're sitting within the insurance industry, where are things, especially during COVID? I mean, we're going to chat a lot about how COVID's affecting all those industries, but as it is now, are things moving? Where is there activity? Tell me what it looks like from your perspective.
Well, I'll start from a sort of whole market perspective, which isn't just within entertainment and sport, but in general, the insurance industry has seen significant claims over the last couple of years. And there are some areas where there will have been less claims. For example, during the full lockdown, there were a lot less cars on the road, so there will be less motor claims. But that is such a small proportion of the insurance industry as a whole. And globally, the insurance industry has seen significant claims over the last couple of years, and we're probably looking across the board at increases in reinsurance rates and increases in rates to the customers as a whole, both in their commercial space and personal lines. So that's something that we're kind of bracing for, and we're trying to tell our sort of customers to brace for. And it's not the best time, because certainly a lot of industries, a lot of companies in this time are not having a good time. And so to be
where did that come from? Why was there an increase in claims?
Well, if you look, for example, at in the entertainment space, within live music and events, there have been significant claims on events that have been cancelled as a result of coronavirus. Hundreds of millions have been paid out, and with the proportion of claims to premiums being off the charts. So that's just one area, but then you can look at sort of other areas where we've seen significant problems with flooding and adverse weather over the last year and a half. Those sorts of things that will all have had an impact on rates.
Okay. So basically what the punchline is, what you're saying is it's going to get more expensive.
It won't get more expensive for everyone, but generally, as a whole, the insurance market, reinsurance rates are going up. So as a whole, it will get more expensive in general terms.
Excuse my ignorance, this is a very blunt question, but you spoke a little bit about the claims people are putting in because of COVID. So I just want to say, are most people covered for these canceled gigs because of COVID? Is that what you're seeing? Are most claims being paid? Are actually some people, are most falling through the cracks?
Well, it depends. If you take two specific areas, one is one contentious area at the moment, which has been seen by the Financial Conduct Authority's test case, which they've done Hiscox has been in the spotlight specifically, along with a number of other insurers. On the public liability side, a number of policies haven't paid out for business interruption, but a number of policies have. Now, that means that a number of small business and medium-sized businesses may have had a payout of a sublimit of maybe 100,000 or 200,000, which will be a significant amount of claims. But a big proportion of policies haven't paid out on business interruption, and that's currently going through courts and appeals at the moment, and we still don't know the end outcome. We know, first off, that the consumers were successful in saying that these policies should pay out, but we don't know the full extent to which the insurers like Hiscox will have to pay out at this point, because they're still going through an appeals process.
Okay, and I can appreciate too, I mean, the overused word of this year is unprecedented.
Yeah.
So I'm sure when creating these policies, perhaps you were thinking of a global pandemic that shuts down everything. Perhaps you weren't. In the future, re-looking at reinsuring and policies, I'm assuming that's worked in.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be. It's on everyone's minds. What a number of people. What the argument has been. They have said that insurers have said, and we're a broker, so we would take the side of our clients to help them through challenges with underwriters. But certainly, what the underwriters have said is these policies weren't designed for a global pandemic, and that's kind of been one of the reasons for getting out of it. But they've also gone through the words within the contract of insurance and said, this is the actual reason why we're not paying out on the insurance. And without going into the significant details of it, on the surface of it, that's a kind of general overview. But in other areas, and you mentioned that's just liability within contingency and say non-appearance of artists. Fortunately, we were quite unique because we had our own specific wording for non-appearance within the contingency market, and that's paid out. Whereas I know a number of non-appearance policies haven't paid out on all of their claims. So it really does depend on the wording and the insurers and the relationship that clients have with their brokers and those brokers have with those insurers. But it's mainly about the contracts that have been put in place.
Before we go into that, because I'm very interested in some of your advice and the wording to look for, can we just look at, I can hear our clients talking in my ear about, well, I'm a freelancer, so this doesn't really apply to me, or I'm a crafts. Can we go through each industry in terms of what you're seeing within entertainment? So let's start easy and look at film. I mean, everyone's seeing that. I think Mission Impossible's filming again, Batman's filming again. So tell us a little bit about what's happening in film and broadcast first.
Well, film and broadcast is actually one of the first sort of creative industries to come out strongly from the pandemic, and we've seen a lot of shooting starting to take place. The key reason for that, compared to a lot of the other industries that we insure, is because there's no live audience, or there tends not to be a live audience with filming. And when there has been a live audience within shows that you have on a Saturday night with live audiences, they tend to have got rid of the live audience and they carry on with the shows anyway. So what we've seen is the film and TV productions starting to kick off, and that has also been helped significantly by the film and TV restart scheme, which the government has put in place. So a £500 million backstop, which protects film and TV production companies against the COVID-19 either postponing or abandoning the shoot schedule. And so that's been a significant benefit to get film and TV back up and running. And we've seen a lot more productions come to us and say, we need our production insured. We want to get started before the end of this year. We want to get started as soon as possible. And the government's been really helpful in getting that together, because they see the film and TV industry as having such a strong high export value for the UK creative industries and for the UK economy as a whole. They might not see it the same for music and live events within the UK, because they can't export the value of a production and have box office and everything coming back to the UK domicile businesses. So it is a different model, and that's why film and TV at the moment has started off strongly off the back of the pandemic as we continue to go through it.
That's so interesting. And do you think the government underwriting of that industry actually encourages insurers to take a little bit more risk where they wouldn't have otherwise?
So the government underwriting that industry will inevitably allow underwriters to have some more risk. They would never have taken the level of risk that the government has taken, because they don't have the capacity, and particularly after a whole lot of losses throughout the course of the year, they weren't willing to write communicable disease into a policy. But now that they are writing it into a policy, the government are writing it, we do have some insurers that are willing to put certain elements that the government haven't included within their scheme as a buyback. So if you're missing out on something in relation to age, you might be able to buy that from one insurer. If you're missing out on something relating to a delay, you could buy that from another insurer. So it's quite an interesting market from our perspective to see how this scheme has impacted on what production companies want to buy.
Is there a lesson that can be learned maybe? I know you said it's not totally applicable because of the live audience and the export value, but let's move into music at the moment and first look at venue and festivals, really. And maybe they're two totally different things when it comes to looking at insurance, but you would let me know. So what's happening with festivals and venues that you see?
So if we start with festivals and we see what happened this year with a number of festivals, many festivals from this year, if they didn't have insurance, may have just rolled over the tickets and rescheduled the festival, postponed the festival to next year, which is quite a possible thing to do, and they may be obliged to pay back some of their ticket holders, dependent on the terms and conditions. But we have seen festivals, most festivals of our client festivals have postponed. With venues, it's a very different story, because they're obviously open throughout the course of the year, and they don't really have any understanding about when they're going to be reopening. And the promoters who are looking to book shows in those venues, again, don't know when we're going to get some good news. When is there going to be a vaccine? When are there going to be relaxation in the restrictions that have been put upon the societies, and in which areas are they going to be de-restricted, and at what point? So it is so complex at the moment for venues to understand how they can start to look at the future. So what we've been working on, actually, I'll just mention this if you like, is a proposal to look into March, April next year, to start from March, April next year, which would be a similar sort of thing, a government-backed reinsurance scheme. If we could get that sort of thing off the ground, we've put a proposal together which suggests that we should be able to get back up and running by April. The furlough scheme is coming to an end. We don't know what the future of the job retention scheme looks like. Can we get promoters and venues into a position where they can start planning from April? And if they can't start in April, then can we have a bit of a financial backstop? It means that the government don't have to put the money up front now. They only have to start paying out from March, April time if it's bad then, and they might not have to pay out at all. And then that would run on until later in the year, when hopefully we'll be able to there'll be a live music and festivals and events touring as it was this time last year.
That's all fingers and toes crossed. So for March, April, because I was thinking too, like never before, perhaps you guys have some connectivity to the healthcare industry and the vaccines that are being developed, or the tests that are being developed. And what are you, is there a sweet spot about March, April? Was it just that it felt like there's enough of a runway, or are you tracking maybe some of the health developments?
It's a combination of the two. We're working with the music industry, or the breadth of the music industry, through our clients, people who aren't our clients, anyone that insures themselves or doesn't insure themselves. We speak to them, and we also speak to authorities where relevant, and try and get an understanding of what's coming down the track. Obviously, we've got so much uncertainty over what's happening this week, next week, and in the next 2 months. So I'm not saying it's planned with anything absolutely specific in mind, but certainly I'm hopeful that March, April will be realistic. Some within the industry are a bit more pessimistic and saying we might not be able. Let's not start planning until sort of June next year, June, July. But certainly, if we put a marker down as end of March, then that's a place to start, and then that can be reviewed. But I think that's a realistic place, and it's a good time for the season to start, and that's when live music really starts more significantly than the rest of the year.
And for live music, hence the audience and people packed in quite tightly together. Are insurers looking at the development of tests, do you think, or are they actually really banking on a cure at this point?
I think insurers are keeping all eyes open for any changes.
Okay.
They and we are obviously hopeful of both good, quick testing, 20-minute tests if necessary, particularly for shows which would take place hopefully before. We're not saying nothing's going to take place before the end of March. We think if quick testing can take place, as I've seen in the news, by December, January, we're hoping that those sorts of things may be able to be implemented. That they will obviously come at a cost, because it's not the sort of thing that it's going to be provided by government. But if quick testing can take place first, and then we're at a point where there's vaccines that are rolled out, then that's something that both us and insurers are looking really closely at.
Okay, that's so great. Thank you. And moving on to now more freelancers and people who have small businesses, or even like kind of booking groups who are booking folks. Can you tell me a little bit about what's happening in that area?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the, and it really depends on the structure of the contracts that freelancers may have had at the time, but freelancers have certainly been hit really hard this year, and they often will have just been insured for what's necessary. So whether that be travel insurance and public liability insurance, and maybe their kit as well. Often a lot of freelancers wouldn't have had any sort of cover to have covered what's happened to their income throughout the course of this year. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's going to be any sort of insurance in place that's going to allow them to be covered for any loss or lack of income that they'll see going into next year. And what we've seen over the last year, over the last sort of 5 or 6 months, is a number of freelancers repurposing their skills into doing things that are very similar to their existing roles within music and live events, or film and TV previously, but now that's getting up and running again, or within theatres, and actually just going and doing some work elsewhere. But it's not, there isn't I genuinely don't believe there's enough jobs or roles for everyone in those areas and those spaces at the moment. So all we can hope for is that we can get something in place to enable promoters to plan and put things in venues, and allow them to contract with freelancers, so that freelancers have something to work towards, and everybody can start getting the industry up and running again as soon as it is possible.
Yeah, that's so great. And okay, before we move on to some more really practical advice in my slightly scary fearless notebook, for questions that people submitted, there's 2 possible disruptors in, I think, the kind of an insurance world, and they may not be. So I just wanted to run them by you. So we're so concentrated on global pandemic and COVID, and fair enough, it's changed everything, that perhaps the disruptive political situation and Brexit coming up might not play into our imagination about insurance premiums and what's happening. Is that a reality? Is also the uncertain political climate too affecting the price of insurance and policy?
I think that the Brexit will probably have an impact on policies themselves and what they're covered for, what is covered within those policies. Whether it has an impact on premium, I'm not sure how much of an impact Brexit would have specifically on premium, but it will have an impact on coverage, and it will also have an impact on the practicalities of, say, for example, I'll give one example: touring bands and freelancers. If they are going between the UK and Europe and back again multiple times, and there is uncertainty around tour schedules, and you used to be able to have very easy movement between the continent and the UK, and that might not be the case. It might be the case that the insurance policies don't or stipulate that more adequate time has to be given to get across. It obviously has an impact in other ways outside of insurance, which we don't know all of the details of until we know what the deal looks like, such as Brexit, such as visas and other certain elements, that tariffs and that we have no visibility of at this point. Well, I know we're only a couple of months away, but we've still got.
That's amazing. It's like driving through a very thick fog, isn't it? We can't see very far ahead.
We can't see very far ahead at all, and there's certainly going to be uncertainty. And when we get more details, it will allow us as insurance brokers to be able to help to advise on the insurance matters and where applicable any other matters. But it is just, there is so much unknown around Brexit at the moment, and it is it's not in the news as much as, of course, it would have been if it wasn't for COVID-19.
Exactly. I was wondering that from your perspective too, because of course you want to advise your clients the best you can, but in a time, especially if they need to be reinsured at a time of complete uncertainty like this, where we really don't know what we're going into, how does one offer advice? How are you guys finding your way?
Well, it very much depends on the clients and the sectors that we're seeing, but what we would advise, I guess, particularly on use the freelancers example again, we would say keep your policy live, reduce it down to the activity that you're actually going under. So you may well have said you were turning over a significant amount of money in previous years, but actually put it down to the turnover for this year. That will bring your premiums down. Get yourself into a position where, if you've got a travel policy and you're not traveling, lapse your travel policy for a couple of months, because then you're not paying for it whilst you don't need it. But certainly pay for the things that you need, like your public liability and certainly in employer's liability. And if you've got any kit that you're keeping on location rather than traveling worldwide, take off the worldwide extension from that policy and just have it in your office location, if that's the most suitable thing to do. We'll be giving this sort of practical advice day in, day out, to help to save our freelancers and our other clients as much as they can to get them through this.
I know. I think that one of the biggest challenges that seems to come up, and we'll get into this in a second, is that if there's no income coming in and there's no business being had, it's really difficult because it's not like there's no business, it's just paused. And there might be a nuance between when you physically can't do business and then when you choose not to, because I know that in some people's insurance contracts, if they're not doing business, you're not covered. But if you physically can't do business and the government tells you not to, then that clearly is a different situation. So here's another question I thought too, from insurers' perspective. I know more and more people are going online, whether it's through concerts or through selling their things, and they're gaining a virtual audience. And whether this sticks as COVID dissipates or not, it completely radically changes the workplace. I'm talking to you, we're both at home. Surely this is radically changing the insurance world as well.
It is changing the insurance world. Practically speaking, for me, it's changed. For all my colleagues and for all of the industry. I mean, lots of people are working from home from that perspective. But in terms of risks that are being placed, yes, absolutely, it's changing those too. As I mentioned, if you've got if you're not going to be traveling, you don't need any travel cover. You don't need kit cover for Europe or the USA, and all of those things will be changing the way in which insurers look at and analyze those risks, and the impact of this kind of the social change on the things that cause the claims will have had a significant impact on what's happened. We may well, because of the year that we've had with not very much live music going on, we may well have a better year, or insurers may have a better, more profitable year because there were no events on. But actually they might not, because if you think about it, the portfolio of an entertainment insurance book will have you could have all of the kit of one production companies in one warehouse, and if that all got wiped out, the impact of a flood, for example, in that area has an impact on the full insurance. So it's going to be for us, and this, it's going to, we'll have to wait till the end of the year to sort of take stock and see what it looks like. And insurers are very much in the same place with unknowns. We don't know what it's going to look like next year, but we are anticipating a significant change from this year in the way in which we look at risk. They look at risk.
Okay, Tim, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And before we dive into the fearless business questions, I have one, and it may be slightly silly, but I'm trying to put myself in your position and being in the world you are in terms of connecting people with insurance and looking at risk and premiums. Are you insured up the wazoo? Like, is your house insured? When you walk up the street, are you insured? Is it hard not to get out of that mindset?
Personally, I think I'm very insured. There are loads of things that I take insurance out for. So whether I've got obviously motor, home, travel, pet insurance, all of those sorts of things, but then I also insure my excesses on those policies and all of that. So I insure myself probably a bit too much.
That is awesome, and I think pretty inspiring, because from a perspective where it's important to insure things, let's dive into some of these questions. So if you see my head going down, I am reading. So we talked a little bit about how has alternative finance models affected insurance, but how has alternative streaming options affected insurance too? So and affect insurance rates. So now that we have streaming, we have games online, have you seen that shift a bit?
Well, certainly, for one thing, we've seen, I don't think it impacts rating as such. They're kind of different risks, so you would class them as a different policy. So we might take on an esports company or an esports team and look at that team on the merits of the risks that the event producer, the venue, and the team have. If a production company has moved away from producing live music and events into esports, we would look to re-rate that and change the sort of business description from live music and events to that sort of thing. And streaming certainly has seen us take on a number of different policies. So whilst we would continue to take on the standard liability policies, we might add in transmission failure from a particular event insurance, which we wouldn't have done in the past. So there are all sorts of different sort of nuances around how insurance policies change when business descriptions change, and streaming has certainly had a big impact.
Here's a bit as an American metaphor, a curveball for you for this. So a lot of businesses in the Highlands and Islands, especially in community centers, are mixed use spaces. And during the time of COVID, that's really complicated because you might have a theater that also has a gallery, that also has a cafe, and their former insurance doesn't really cover, as we talked about, COVID policies, where maybe the theater shut down and they can have 2 people in the gallery, so their turnover is down, and maybe they can do takeout from the cafe now. So when, I guess that when turnovers changed so significantly, first of all, what impact does it have on insurance premiums? And is it flexible at all?
Well, I would say that turnover doesn't have a directly correlating impact on the premium. So if your turnover goes down by half, don't expect your premium to.
But in this new time, should it? I guess is
to be honest, there are so many other risks that are unrelated to turnover that that bear on the way and bear on the rating of that particular policy. So I would say that there are, whilst there is turnover is one factor, you've got to look at the premises, this say if it's a property risk, or the employees, if you're including employers liability within that risk. So it's turnover, yes, it will have an impact, but it's not going to be an impact that some people would hopefully or may hope to expect, because you've got to look at all of the risks within that policy that are covered, and it's not just on the business activity, it's on the property. And
okay, that's interesting. And well, for those mixed use spaces, are you finding that kind of complicated business diversity a challenge when it comes to insurance?
It does present a challenge, and we really encourage our clients to call us up, and we'll call them up regularly anyway, just to sort of catch up and check they're doing okay, and understand how their business is changing, because we want to make sure that they're covered for what they're doing. Where they've got a mixed use space, if they said that they did 80% live music previously and now they're doing 80% something else, it's best that we know about it, because it may have a bearing on rating positively for them, or sometimes negatively. But certainly they need to sort of keep in touch with their brokers and with their insurers, just to make sure that they're covered for what they're doing.
I'm sure they appreciate a call from you. You're probably a very friendly voice on the phone. And when you do chat with them, is there commonalities in terms of the questions that they have, or what do you hear?
Well, we're just hearing stories about how there isn't much business. What can they do to save costs? In some cases, in other cases, we're hearing stories that, right, we've got all of this equipment that is really useful and we can use it for this other industry. Can we use it for this other industry? Does that have an impact on rating? Can you get that approved, and can we get documents updated? We're also just catching up with them about ideas and what other areas of the industry and how they link up with what they're doing. Because one thing that we've certainly seen, I've seen, and I know that a number of my colleagues have seen, is they a lot of clients will come to us and ask us questions about the industry, because they know how vertically integrated we are, and they'll almost be asking for advice on not just their insurance, but what's everyone else doing?
It's really
how
helpful.
can we help? Who can you introduce us to? And we like those conversations, because we can be helpful in not just providing insurance cover for them. We can actually help them
More networking
going forward. Yeah,
that's actually that is very interesting, and probably something that some people might not be taking advantage of. So, okay, very specific questions, and we did touch on this, but for festival producers, especially festival, and I know everyone's eyes are looking at Glastonbury and kind of what they're going to do, but how do they plan without insurance at the moment? How can they even plan?
So a festival like Glastonbury will plan quite differently to a festival which may not have quite the level of demand that Glastonbury does. Glastonbury has done exceptionally, amazingly well over the last years, and is an amazing festival. And so that's probably it's certainly a very difficult one to plan for, but you'd plan for it in a different way to a smaller festival. Say you could take a festival of 15,000 people, or 10 or 15,000 people, and you would look to say, right, how do I plan for next year without insurance? And the difficulty is, there's no really good answer for this that is going to completely protect you financially going into next year's festival season with the uncertainty that we have. What we would suggest is that you continue to purchase the insurances that you have always purchased in the past. So whether that be an event cancellation policy for the event, which would have included adverse weather and all of the other perils that were relevant to putting on a festival. Continue to take out your liability insurances. We would advise that all festivals do that. But buy insurance as you did normally in the past. But then as you're going through the process of planning the festival, and this is kind of not so much insurance related advice, but more advice on how we would do it and how we're seeing a number of festivals planning for next year, is manage your contractual liabilities as best you possibly can. So pay if you can, pay deposits at the appropriate level at the appropriate times, and make sure that all parties have read their contracts, because contractual disputes between, say, a freelancer and a festival organizer, nobody wants them. So always read the contract, always make sure you're happy with whatever you have chosen to do as part of that contract. So whether it's a freelancer, making sure that they're happy with the contract that the festival promoters put on, the festival promoter has to be happy with what they've agreed to pay the freelancer upfront. All of those things need to be factored into the planning process for festival organizers. And I would say that's the key thing, and some of the key questions that we're having, because if there is going to be an insurance policy that covers COVID, then it's going to be more restrictive than the standard cancellation policies. So we're going to have to wait and see. But we don't know what that looks like yet, because we're not anywhere close to seeing what the end of the pandemic COVID-19 looks like.
Still in the fog. So linking back to what you said before about that you had a specific wording about kind of no-show.
Yeah.
Are there, for folks who are looking to take up policies or not doing business at the moment, might not even be able to afford the policies that they are used to, are there specific wording that we should all look out for to help us?
I would say it's got to be very much a consultative process with the broker that you work with. It's really challenging to, particularly for people that don't read insurance policies day in, day out, to understand what they mean. So make sure you pick a good broker who has done a lot of, say, event cancellation or non-appearance policies, and can explain it in detail, and explains both over the phone, in person when we can, and on email, all of the details about those policies, and ask as many questions as you need to get yourself comfortable with the policy that you're taking out. Don't just go in and buy a policy, because you need to know what you're covered for. Yeah.
Okay, that's very good advice. And we can assume most of the folks aren't doing business at the moment. The majority of people aren't. So are there money saving policies that we should be aware of that are out there that might be appropriate for folks not doing business currently?
I don't think I would say that there are specific money saving policies that are out there, but it depends on how you've bought your policy in the past. But certainly if you bought it through a broker like Tysers or Integra, as we were, then we would suggest just picking up the phone, whoever your broker is, pick up the phone and ask what they can do in the interim if your business activities have changed, either up or down, but particularly down. If there's anything that we could do to help, it's something that we would welcome doing if possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but if possible, we would.
And I know you don't have a crystal ball, and you've actually already gave a really interesting insight into this, but a lot of the questions we received are about moving forward into 2021. What kind of year is it going to be? Can people get optimistically hopeful that things might have a slight return to normal? What is the risk assessment that you would give that hope? Or can we get hopeful about 2021?
I would say I'm
very carefully.
I'm an optimist, really, in that sense, and I really would. Although, if you'd asked me the same question in April this year, I would have probably said, "Oh, yeah, everything will be fine by July."
Yeah, totally.
But I really do hope that we are in a better place next year. I would suggest, I mean, hold on for as long as you possibly can, and plan for next year, because planning for next year is the best way to sort of keep everything going. I would say that, yeah, it's all about hope, really, isn't it? And we've got to be hopeful that we've got a good year coming up next year, and we've got back to some sort of normality. It may not be as it was this time last year, but if we've got events going on in a different format, at least we've got events going on. That's right. We're getting films up and running again. Hopefully theatres will, some theatres are opening again this December. All of these things give us hope and give people in the industry hope. So let's be optimistic.
Tweeted the Royal Albert Hall is having a socially distanced concert. That's hopeful.
Yeah, that is indeed. Yeah, we're partnered with the Royal Albert Hall, and they're planning to do a number of socially distanced concerts over the December period, and we're looking forward to seeing how they pan out, and the feedback from them, because Christmas without the Royal Albert Hall doesn't really seem like Christmas for us anyway. So it's such a great place, and there are also other events that are doing pilot gigs. So the O2 are planning some in certainly one kicking off in December, and some smaller venues as well. So we're just looking forward to seeing how those go. I know we've seen a few pilots take place 2-3 weeks ago, and a bit beyond that. We're just hoping to see more, and we've seen a lot of venues put in significant measures to ensure that, and they've spent significant money in to ensure that they're safe. And so we really do hope that governments and local authorities see that, understand that they're safe places to go, and allow these to take place if indeed it's safe to do so.
I really hope we get this dance down between the risk assessment, the work that people are putting in, the policies that are coming out, insurers maybe being a little bit more flexible or responsive to this time, because people's livelihoods are really dependent on it. So
absolutely, and we're certainly seeing more flexibility from our partner insurers in the way in what they're looking to insure, whether it will include COVID-19 cover on certain elements, whether it won't. We're absolutely clear with all of our clients as to whether it will include it or whether it doesn't, and we'll help them through it. But we've just got quite a long way to go till we get absolute clarity on what it looks like.
Well, here's to clarity. And before we leave, thank you so much. Really, it's been a total pleasure having you, and you're fearless to come on Fearless Business Week. We always leave with a little bit of advice, and it can be advice that you have been given by a grandparent that you found helpful over the years, a friend, something you've learned along the way. But what is something that you think's really just general good advice that helps you do what you do?
I guess the main bit of advice that I've taken, I've always looked after, and it's really simple, and it's just to be really proactive, be as proactive as possible, and then that for me has seen some good wins, and it's seen some sort of failings on the way, and that sort of thing, some embarrassment. But yeah, be proactive, and hopefully we as our business, other businesses will be able to get some success out the back end of this year and into next year.
Tim, that's great. Well, good luck, and we look forward to hopefully the lovely events to come.
Yes, I can't wait.
Bye. Take care. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining that session with Tim Thornhill from Tysers. Now, insurance is a really big topic. It's also incredibly important for the recovery of the creative industries. So just to recap on some of the highlights, just to be aware insurance prices may rise, please always look at the fine print in your contract. Talk to your insurance broker, ask questions, make sure that there is COVID relief if you are reinsuring. And last but not least, there are some changes ahead. Insurance is a big topic. The future is unknown, and it is a changing industry. So there might be some new initiatives coming out. You might have more questions about insurance. And we really want to encourage you to be in touch with us. So please visit XpoNorth.co.uk. If you do have questions, look for the Sector Specialist Services section and email us. Thanks so much, and hope you enjoy the rest of Fearless Business Week.